Hello, friends and scaly ones. I'm Amanda Hammond, the editorial director of Kobold Press, and with me I have a very special guest today to discuss our brand new Scarlet Citadel Kickstarter, all of the details, all of the fun backstories, all of the terrible secrets and embarrassing stories. Here with me today, we've got Wolfgang Baur. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, sure, yeah. I'm Wolfgang Baur. I'm the founder and Kobold in Chief at Kobold Press, and I don't know. I've been crawling around dungeons for a very long time, so this is familiar ground for me. And yeah, we kicked off the Scarlet Citadel Kickstarter because it was a dungeony project, and I don't know. I started my RPG career at a magazine called Dungeon Adventures, so it feels like coming home.
Little bit on the nose, yeah,
Yeah, a little
exactly.
bit, and I'm okay with that.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll get into some of the old school origins of the dungeon, maybe now, but especially later in the stream. But why don't we give folks the basic details of what this project is? We just launched yesterday. We funded in under 2 hours on Monday, excuse me, 2 days ago. Time is a thing in the world of the global pandemic. We just
Sure.
launched and we've hit about $70,000, a little over that, over 1,000 backers. Folks have been very wonderful and generous in their support of us. But this is an old school dungeon adventure, right, Wolfgang?
Sure.
For 10
Yeah,
levels
no,
of play.
Scarlet Citadel is a dungeon that predates 5th edition D&D. But it's meant, of course, to be, it's totally compatible with 5th edition, but it traces its roots back to 3.5. And gameplay in my home campaign way back when. As that dungeon you don't really want to go to because it'll kill you. And it sort of started not quite as a joke, but as, people would crawl back into town, adventurers, NPCs, and say, yeah, I'm the one who got out. The rest of the party left their bones back there. Don't recommend it. The Yelp ratings on the Scarlet Citadel pretty much all read like 1 star, loot okay, almost TPK, right? Like it was meant to be the highly dangerous place that you weren't ready for yet. And so teasing first level adventurers with, oh, this is a true map that'll get you through it.
Right. Oh, so the map is the carrot and you're dangling that in front of the
The map is the
adventurers.
carrot.
And the
Everybody
dungeon is the
sells.
stick.
Well, my players aren't dummies. They've all been, they're often industry people, right? Or they've been
Right.
playing for 5 or 10 years. And so when I throw them a map, they're like, too easy. And when I get them a second map saying, no, this one's real, all the red flags go up, all the warning signs, and they don't want to go until I tell them just how much money that one survivor came back with. So
You
it's meant to be, fear versus greed is basically the backstory of the Scarlet Citadel.
Right, right. Yeah, it's absolutely hedging bets and figuring out like, oh, is this going to be worth it if we die? Well, will it be worth it if she dies? How many adventurers can we justify dying in this citadel, right, for the
Right. And it's like
rewards?
if we can afford all the raised deads and we have cash left over, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Because hey, XP, right?
Yeah. So
Long before milestones.
right? Yeah. Oh, well, that's a very good point. So you wrote a really interesting update about this in this vein for yesterday for the about the
Sure.
origins of everything. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you just mentioned it, but you had a specific group of players who were fumbling around in the Zobek area and they
Yeah,
were
this was a campaign, Priestess of Lada, a Tiefling, Sorcerer. There was a whole bunch of great characters who were really city characters, right? They liked going into the under city, the nearby forest, up to the Dwarven Mountains, but never more than a couple days ride from the city of Zobek. And I'm like, okay, this is their home base. This is the campaign. It's fine. But I think what really happened is I got bored doing city and forest adventures. And I wanted to do more of a old school crawl or just Get them
Like,
out of town.
yeah,
I
this
don't
is
know.
far too safe. There's a city watch. There are only a few low-level monsters, rats running around in the dungeon. I really want to drop like a deadbolt trap on your heads.
Yes, like I really want deadly traps that aren't part of the arcane collegium, right? If the wizard school is deadly, fine, but you're not students, you can't visit. Let's do an old school dungeon. So I basically told them, yeah, it's far too dangerous. You'll never survive. Don't go there. And it was kind of a bet of, would they say, yeah, pshaw, you're just trying to scare us off the good treasure, or would they finally pull the, no, we're going to listen to you this time. We're going to follow your plot direction and not go to the place you tell us not to go to. I don't know. Different groups of players have different reactions to reverse psychology, but for once it worked for me. I said, don't go, and they went.
So Wolfgang, is this entire project an exercise in you actually wanting to run this dungeon that you had worked up for your home game and your players decided that they wanted nothing to do with, and now you
Well,
get to
they did
inflict it on the
decide they
world?
wanted some. No, they decided they wanted to go, but then I may have overplayed my hand because pretty much every room was a death trap in the version I wrote. Like, you go in, the first couple rooms are going to kill you. The second couple rooms are going to kill you. My model was basically Tomb of Horrors, right?
Ah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
as we call it now, Tomb of Annihilation.
Tomb of Annihilation. That's a great one. So, you know, and me coming in on this project as editorial director, a lot of the text was already ordered, and Steve Winter, you know, who has a wonderful pedigree with Wizards of the Coast and TSR going all the way back, he already
Absolutely.
had written much of this.
He had written tons of it. Actually, it's even more than that. There was no point in taking my 3.5 stuff and trying to make it 5e. My maps were awful. A lot of them were little circles and stick diagram. I think bad maps for my home campaign. My maps are kind of pathetic, and I wanted better maps. So, and I remembered that the maps for Undermountain were actually drawn before the dungeon was written. So I said to Steve,
Yeah.
what if we took all the concepts from the Scarlet Citadel, all the themes and characters, but we redrew the maps, or we had a professional cartographer redraw the maps. So John Pintar has been working with Kobold Press for years and years. And we kind of, it's not the kind of project you want to drop on a cartographer. Like, hey, we want you to do a multi-level dungeon of these vast battle maps. Oh, and by the way, we're just going to give you some themes and ideas. You make them up, right? Like,
Yeah.
unless they're into that.
That's sort of a cartographer's dream, though, right? I mean,
Well, not every cartographer's dream.
There might be some cartographers who are like, oh, this is too much pressure. I can't handle it.
Right? Well, the thing of it was very collaborative getting the maps done, because both Steve and I had ideas about what should and shouldn't be on the maps and how they should connect. And so, like, the death trap sections I was interested in, well, this is where we got into the overlay concept, right?
Right.
We wanted
Yeah.
maps that would change,
Yes.
so that you could see before the death trap springs and after the death trap springs illustrated on the map in front of you.
What sort of splatters and splotches are left after these things have exploded?
Yes. I don't want to give away spoilers on all the traps, but I want to give away spoilers on
Wolfgang,
all the traps.
I want you to give away spoilers on these traps. Tell us spoilers. Tell us your favorite trap, and then I'll pull them out of you one by one.
I'm gonna give away the spoilers we've already sort of given away, right?
Yeah.
Because the video for the Kickstarter includes 2 of the overlays. Actually, oh, and there goes the dog. There's my death trap dog.
One of the traps is just a dog mimic, right?
It is. It's release the hounds.
Yeah.
But no, there's an entryway. How much backstory do I want to give to
give us all the backstory.
No, I don't want to. Anyway, there's a section of the dungeon that was dug out and created and optimized by a bunch of dwarven mercenaries. So it's all about angles of fire and making sure they're behind the arrow slits and you are dead meat, right? So there's nothing like having a bunch of militant dwarves design a passageway, I'll just leave it at that, that you're supposed to go through on the way into some deeper sections. And the great part about it is, yeah, there's arrow slits and there's all of that. There's also, it's the classic medieval thing, right? The portcullis on one end, the gates that shut behind you, and then boiling oil, poison gas. It's everything at once that could go wrong. And
right.
And the party, says no, right? Like it's 2 saving throws, 1 for fire and 1 for poison.
Yes.
And then the arrows hit you. And it seems really wildly unfair.
Mm.
At which point I'm like, remember that guy in the tavern? The one who said, don't go?
You
okay,
went.
I'm just reminding you now.
You know what you did.
You know what you did.
Exactly.
My party managed to get out, but I believe that was the first party death in the game. Was
the gauntlet the dwarven hallway gauntlet?
It was. So, the gauntlet was thrown, as it were. And from that point on, they changed their play style, because suddenly they realized it's not one of those optimized dungeons where every encounter is beatable. It's one of those dungeons.
Poles came out.
Yeah, a little bit of the 10-foot pole, a little bit of I send my familiar ahead, a little bit of
oh, I can always resummon my animal companion. Who cares if they die a horrible death on spikes in a pit?
It depends on the player, but yeah, there are some pretty bitter, jaded veterans who are like, whatever, I'll get another one. And there was a discussion about whether hirelings from the village would show up.
Yeah.
And so basically, yeah, I had a bunch of old school players who remembered what happened in Tomb of Horrors and similar first edition, second edition games.
Yeah.
When the deadly crawl was more of a thing.
Yes.
This version of Scarlet Citadel retains some of that ethos, and you can, if you are incautious, you can wind up in big, big trouble. But there's also sections that are more exploration and role. I want to say it's one big death trap, because that was my original concept, and then I realized
the revenge of Wolfgang Baur.
Yeah, I realized it was only going to be fun for a little while, and then it was going to be a TPK, right?
Right. Yeah, sometimes that's fun, especially if you've got people who are going into the adventure knowing that it's deadly, knowing that it's very likely that some people will die, and that is part of the fun. But some people get very, players get understandably very upset.
Of course, and I didn't want to wipe out, the whole party on someone's birthday or whatever, right? Like that's
exactly, yeah.
It's never good. Don't do that. But
unless they want it, unless they like it.
I have had players step up and say, "I'm leaving the campaign, make it epic," right? Like,
I have too. Yeah,
I'm moving, right?
That's so much fun as a DM, but also sad because
it is. But you really get to give them the spotlight, right? And they know they're going out with a bang.
Yeah.
If they're cool with it. If they're not, then they just ride into the sunset and retire. But
that's true. That's a really interesting concept that you've brought up, which is having some kind of verisimilitude within the internal narrative of the dungeon crawl, having things be connected and make sense, and whether it's an outside factor influencing it, like a player leaving, or there's something the players came across or something that you made up as the DM in the dungeon. It all kind of has to gel together to make sense, or folks start to disconnect. Right.
And that's always a plus, especially when the dungeon is as many levels as Scarlet Citadel, right? Things need to connect a little bit. There needs to be a little story. Once you scratch at why is this loot here? Why are these notebooks here? There's always a bard or a wizard or somebody who pokes at the lore a little bit. And I adore those characters, because like, I can be Basil Exposition for a minute and tell you, well, it was Gerhardt the Elder who first discovered this. Okay. And they get their player handout, and I let them do what they want with it.
Yes.
We do have plans for a couple of player handouts, actually. So if you have those players who want to know, why is there this deadly dungeon crawl and why is it so hard? There's a rationale. So.
Yeah, and we also have a lot of supporting information that's coming out in the adventure as well, things that we'll be including. We just unlocked a stretch goal to include the PDF of Red Tower, which is the supporting village, the hamlet equivalent, right? From Temple of
Yes. Oh my
Elemental Evil.
goodness. Right. It's just a couple hundred people. They don't really have everything you'd get in a big city. But if all you're looking for is a healing potion and a place to sleep and recover hit points, they've got you covered. And there's some plots and things going on there that I quite like. So yeah, every backer gets a copy of that. We'll probably roll it into the final book. I don't know.
I believe there is a stretch goal later on that's rolling out into the final book.
Puts it all in the final book.
Spoiler for you.
Yes, not everybody likes the lore dump, but it's a meaty booklet, and it's included at this point since we hit the stretch goal, and it's all the history, and it's all the the Keep on the Borderlands village, the village of Hamlet. You know what I'm talking about. The nearby place where you can have role-playing encounters. You can meet some other people who are maybe looking to loot the dungeon. And potentially sell your loot later as well.
Yeah, and like we mentioned a little bit earlier in the stream, the things that players do often will affect the way that the adventure unfolds, and that town provides you a place for some of those things to perhaps come to fruition. We've got several friends of ours in our chat. I see our director of operations, Alexander, has said, too many accidents with animal companions has the local circle of druids arriving to have a chat. That could happen in Red Tower.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Red Tower is a forest town and sort of a timber town, but there are druids. And there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of interesting characters. There's also a priestess of Rava, the gear goddess. So if you like constructs and clockwork and those things, there's a very interesting little temple there. And the sun god paladins have been visiting in Red Tower. Anyway, there's a number of groups, but it's just 1 and 2 individuals at a time. It's not like you've got an entire castle full of paladins or an entire...
And it's not a metropolis, right? And it's the same limitations that you have with Temple of Elemental Evil and Tomb of Annihilation, in that you can't just buy whatever magic items you want because the town is only so big. You're limited by what's available, and you're
at least a week or two's travel from civilization. And yeah, you can buy all the wood and timber you need.
So if you want to construct, like, I don't know, giant door ramming logs, you could do that, I guess.
A battering ram is a great idea. And I'm just going to say that the dwarves who built certain passageways were prepared for your battering ram. That's all I'm gonna say.
You might think that it is the craziest, just most over the top idea, and then it might backfire in an equally over the top way.
Well, I like to reward players who decide we're going to buy this log and we're going to carry it into the dungeon and it's going to help us out. But it might not help you out in the way you think right away. But
that's the fun thing to do as a DM, where it's like they literally don't know what's behind the doors. They have no idea, what's awaiting them. And sometimes they really play into stuff that you've got coming.
Yeah, the problem solving, the weird situations, I can't believe this river is flowing right through White Plume Mountain kind of stuff. The inverted pyramids, the strange geometries. That's what makes dungeon crawls fun to me, right? Like if it were all super logical and nothing were too magical and glowing, well, it's just sort of a room clearing exercise. So there's moments of high weirdness in this one.
Oh yeah, and just like you mentioned, the village of Red Tower having druids, and then there's the temple of Rava, the gear goddess. It's a really deep sort of slice into Midgard, right? It's a great insight into the unique things of Midgard, which I think a lot of folks are interested in.
A couple of backers asked, so is this a Midgard adventure? And I'm like, well, yeah, it really is, but it's super easy to dump anywhere else if it's a high fantasy campaign, right? Like Rava, the gear goddess, is super important to Zobek and certain parts of the Midgard setting. But there's no reason you can't just say she's a local goddess that people know about in Red Tower in the realms, right? And make it work. But the whole thing is meant to be, literally, the Scarlet Citadel's been on the map for Midgard since 2012, I think. It's when it first
Yeah.
got put on a printed map.
Was it just an adventure location dot, I believe?
It was a dot in 2012, and then the new edition of the Midgard World Book, there's actual references to Gellert the Gruesome, who's the current, how do we call him? The mad wizard of the dungeon in question.
He's the Hedrake, right? Of this.
Yes,
yeah.
he is. And a few other details about it, but there's not a ton of information, which is why we did that Warlock PDF on Red Tower. It's like nobody knows about it beyond like people who played in the home game. So let's get people up to speed on what the Midgard version is, but then let's make sure, and Steve and I are in pretty good agreement on this, that like it should be a dungeon that's transportable. Dungeons are one of those types of adventures that you don't need to link tightly to the society and assumptions. If you want to run it in Eberron, I'm pretty sure you can.
Yep.
In
Forgotten
fact,
Realms would fit well in.
Right. The Gear Goddess and all the constructs fit pretty well in Eberron. The forest and the druids are easy to drop anywhere in the realm. Yeah, pick your favorite setting, right? But it is a Midgard setting and that's where it comes from. Right. So there are a few quirks of Midgard in there as well. All the void magic and void magic occult obsessions are.
Yeah, now that's an interesting point. So there's a stretch goal that we just unlocked recently about that. Let's talk a little bit about that. There's a whole bunch of void cult magic items now going into the book, thanks to our wonderful backers on Kickstarter. What can folks expect out of that material?
I wish I could tell you, but I don't think it's been written. What I can tell you is void magic. I mean, it's going to be a set of evil magic items and items that grant power, drawing on the outer darkness and a sort of vaguely Cthulhuid, vaguely Far Realms-ish, vaguely...
Oh, Cthulhuid.
Yeah. I mean, the void is this... At least in the Midgard version and in the deep magic spells we published using void as a touchstone, it's entropy, nothingness, annihilation, and despair, right? It's not even necessarily madness of the elder gods. It's just, we're going to destroy the world. There's going to be a big apocalypse. That's our plan.
It's the place beyond the stars. It's the unknowable unknowable. It's all along those themes, correct?
Yes, it is. And it comes with its own language called void speech, which it hurts even to hear, and which is used to create magical effects that sort of unweave the world.
Yes, there's a number of monsters in Creature Codex and Tome of Beasts that have a void speech.
I wrote some of them. Void is one of my favorite flavors in Midgard for villains, right? Like there's chaos villains and Loki villains and there's blood cults, but the void guys, they're all nihilists and they're all just a little
they're your standard hooded evil cultists trying to bring about the end of the world in a very creepy way.
For those who remember Tharizdun, right? The Forgotten Temple. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, a very creative end of the world. We're just slowly going to disintegrate the planet.
Yes.
So yeah, if that's your cup of tea for villains, that kind of magic is nice purple glowy disintegrations for everyone.
So what you're saying is, because we haven't spun up these magic items yet, since they were a stretch goal, is that all of our friends here in chat can suggest options for these void magic items, and we may or may not end up using those ideas, right?
Right. We've done this before. I mean, frankly, Kobold Press is kind of notorious for this. Like we'll do backer brainstorms, and you know, the best concepts often wind up getting written up and polished by Steve or myself or another freelancer as something that goes in the book, because yeah, it's fun to knock this stuff around. And what's the most evil magic item you can come up with? Well, that's fun to discuss. We should probably see about finding a place to host that discussion on the fan site. But yeah, people in chat, if you've got an idea, by all means, throw it out and it will appear in the appendix.
That's right. Everything is on the table. Tell us your wildest ideas for items that will eat your soul, items that will erase your memories, items that will pull your past away from you and give it to someone else, whatever your idea is about these things. If you've watched the recent Color Out of Space movie by Richard Stanley, that's a thing that could happen as well.
Right? Like if the Sphere of Annihilation is your very favorite, then we want to talk to you.
Yeah. So also, I just want to take a moment to greet everybody who is in chat. I see we've got a number of folks who are asking questions, and I want to encourage that. Please, any questions that you have about the project, for us specifically or in general for Kobold Press, please put that in the chat. We'll be happy to answer them if we can. And if we can't, we will be happy to throw around ideas, make stuff up, and then tell you that it's all completely made up and we have no idea.
Some of it is tried and tested. Some of it we're dancing as fast as we can.
That's right. That's right. We appreciate all of your support and all of our fans doing this fun thing with us. So we have got BR Hortz, who's asking, does the Scarlet Citadel have any hooks to any other published Kobold adventures? They would love to motivate their players to visit it with incentives other than loot.
Yes. There is a set of hooks. It has connections to other void cults. So there's some stuff in Book of Layers that would connect. It has connections to Leyline Magic and Zobek. And it has tight connections to the Dragon Empire and the Seven Cities region. So it's an isolated little tower that in a couple of ways has snuck in as a place of importance. Think of it as like a Gibraltar kind of place, right? Like it's not that big. But a number of times in history, it's been important. So this means that people like the Shadow Fae are interested in it. There's a bloodline connection to the courts of the Shadow Fae. There's a couple of magical college. Anyway, yes. Oh my goodness, yes. I love drawing connections to other parts of Midgard that make it easy to say, oh, you guys are whatever, dwarves from here, or a barbarian from there, or a druid from this area. Oh, well, here's a connection that brings you right to the Scarlet Citadel. It can be lore. Oh, and the Priestess of Rava knows stuff that the priests of Rava and Zobek might like to know.
There are all sorts of hidden artifacts and secrets and treasures that have been buried for hundreds, if not thousands of years that can be discovered, or there could be a reason that an NPC is trying to commission someone to go get it. Any other number of quests that could be involved.
Not to mention all those dead adventurers with backpacks full of notebooks and things, right? Like it's pretty easy to say, your character knows someone who died in the Scarlet Citadel.
That's probably very true, right?
You just need their remains so you can raise dead. That's all you need.
You know, because so many adventurers are often orphans, right? There could be the headmaster of the orphanage, right? Mistress Edna could be like, please find out where all my people keep disappearing to.
Right. I lost a whole class.
Yeah. I was waiting for them to show up to geometry one day and they never did. And I've heard stories about this terrible thing that happened to them and this cult that they got involved with.
These nice void people came calling, and next thing I know, yeah.
But you know, yeah, I really like that question, and I also kind of want to, I want to drill a little bit deeper with that if we can. So, because you mentioned that the Scarlet Citadel can be moved about, right? Even within Midgard, it could be placed in another direction. So the possibilities for stringing it with other adventures could potentially be endless, because we've got Scarlet Citadel going from level 1 to 10. That doesn't necessarily mean that the players stay in the Citadel from level 1 to 10. They could end up going on a side quest. It could be outside the Margret Forest, for example.
It could. It wouldn't be too hard to put it. It depends on having a forest and a little bit of water, basically, right? For the setting to hold together without retrofitting it to a degree that might not work. But you could put it, downriver from Zobek along the edge of the Margrave Forest would be an easy transplant if you don't want your party to move all the way overland, a couple weeks down to the White Forest. You could actually port it over into the Elvish realms. The Grand Duchy of Dornag
Now that's a
has
cool
a
idea.
whole bunch of high magic stuff and old elven ruins. And the very early origins of the Scarlet Citadel, as the elves found it first, they built a hunting lodge there. They used it for hundreds of years. When humans came along is when things started to get weird.
Humans cause problems.
Yeah, well, sort of the classic Lord of the Rings, humans seeking power thing. The elves just hung out and had a good time. The humans showed up and said, I can make something out of this. Although, actually,
Those brash, egotistical humans.
well, the von Holtzanger family is the one that found it. Okay, so I wrote all this lore and I love it. They were a bunch of old sorcerers. They found the magical springs of power at the Scarlet Citadel and realized they were pretty great and the elves were underutilizing them. But they were basically a bunch of giant nerds. They just wanted to use it to learn more about their obsessions of the moment. Most of the von Holzangers were deep into their books and arcane study and incredible levels of knowledge and lore. And I mean,
they're the Harpels, right? They're similar to the Harpels.
Yes. They just want to know stuff. They don't even want to do anything with it.
They just want to hoard that knowledge.
They want to hoard knowledge like a dragon.
Yeah.
So they showed up and they used this stuff and they kept it to themselves for a very long time. And they have stacks of lore.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it might tie neatly. Well, it could tie neatly to any of the things like the Strauss Library or the Library at Friula.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Any of the scholarly, worldly types who aren't interested in money but are interested in knowledge would probably freak out if they got some von Holtzanger notebooks.
Oh, yes. They'd be studying that for decades and extrapolating it into all kinds of discoveries, I can imagine.
Yes. So a lot of directions there. It's the thing I like about having layered, I don't know what I want to call it, layered design or design where it's like, there's been a bunch of people who've been through this dungeon. They all left a mark. It's like, well, you pick the hooks you like. If you like the snake people, great, do that. Okay, we don't
do
actually
more
have
snake people.
No. There are not snake people in this dungeon. Don't.
No, but there are owl bears, and there are special owl bears.
I don't want to give away too much about those owl bears, but you're right.
Listen to Wolfgang being like, Amanda, don't you dare. Don't you dare.
Don't you say it.
I won't. I promise. He's my boss. He can fire me. Moving on. You know what? We're talking about adventures and things that can be strung together. BBQ House has a fantastic follow-up question that we can segue into. And they ask, can the material in Scarlet Citadel be broken up into one-shots that could be run with different groups of people? I have a thought, but what do you think?
Wow. One-shots. Well, I mean, the maps are glorious and could all be used as a bunch of separate things without the connections between the levels, which seems like a shame to me. I like the fact that it's a multi-layered cake of dungeony goodness, but if you were like, I need a low-level thing and now some other campaign needs this, I could rip. Yeah, you could rip the sections apart and run them independently if you wanted. I don't think you're getting as much out of it that way.
Right. You're not going to get into the metaplot so much that way. But if you need a few encounters here and there and a scary, high stakes, very mystical feel of a dungeon, then I think that works. And, you know, as Alexander mentions, there's nothing stopping you from taking little slices and putting that in to wherever it makes sense in your campaign.
Right. Every one of those encounters is pretty portable. But that's not the way it was designed, right? Like we have Eldritch Lairs and Prepared and Book of Lairs. Those are all one-shots that were designed as one-shots. So, and I think we
one map encounter.
Lou Anders has been counting them. There's like 100 one-shots published by Kobold Press. So, and the Excel spreadsheet on it is organized by level, terrain, and location, I want to say.
Lou is such a wonderful, devoted fan. I love looking at that to remind myself, what have we got for some of these levels?
Well, we just hit 200 adventures recently. We just went over
Yeah.
the 200 adventure. So anyway, yes, it could be broken up.
Yes, yes. And so that also segues us into BR Hodes, who has another great question that I think is great to speak to. We've talked a lot in this stream about how this is an old school dungeon. We've mentioned adventures that veterans have encountered maybe in their early role-playing days. But I think that this is also a very fun way to learn the ropes of DMing, because
Yes.
Dungeons, right, have got straightforward rules for how things work, and it's an encounter by encounter thing, so that you can learn how to like resolve and run and pace a game. BR Road specifically asked, does this book have any advice for how to run it? They haven't run a dungeon crawl as a DM, but as a player, they found them difficult to sustain interest, and they would like our advice.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. I like that question.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that are meant to sustain interest in a dungeon crawl like this. And Amanda, you already alluded to one, namely Metaplot, right?
Mm.
So more than just room by room, there's larger stories and secrets in the Citadel that a curious group of players will figure out immediately. And even the uninterested parties will eventually say, hey, didn't we see this, guys, or this kind of thing 2 levels back, right? Like, are they connected? At some point, the penny will drop. And at that point, people want to know what's up. But yeah, sustaining interest in a dungeon crawl does mean secrets, handouts. We have player point of view art, so you can just say, hey, you see this thing, right? Which makes it more engaging. And the other part that I think makes a dungeon fascinating, and Steve is so good at this, is the sense of the weird and fantastical, right?
Ooh, give us some examples if you can think of any.
Well, I mean, sort of like the baby steps version of it is, you've got a group of players who've never played D&D before. They go into a dungeon, they open the room. What do we see? And it can be as simple as, you see 16 goblins swinging from a chandelier. Or
Wait, 16? That's so weird.
Yeah, why 16? Don't question them. They're goblins. They have a reason. But it might be something much odder, right? It might be, hey, 16 goblins are busy preparing an enormous dinner or shoveling coal into, a statue that is alive and needs to be fed. What? Why is the statue alive and needs to be fed, right? It's weird on the face of it. It's goblins, so it's going to be weird. But that sort of thing is what I'm talking about, where like the everyday rules of what's going on here don't apply. Like there's a sheet of ice and or a wall of ice and a wall of fire on opposite sides of the room.
Yes. Yeah, so how did those get there? How are they sustained? What fell magic is at work here?
Right. And what purpose is served? Oh, well, right. There's a bunch of runes in the middle that may explain it. Or, right, like you can, if you do more than say it's an orc and a pie, then...
Wait, an orc in a pie or an orc and a pie?
Well, now if it were an orc
distinction
in a pie, then it would have to be somebody's birthday, and you'd say, happy birthday, we got you an orc in a pie.
Oh no, we missed that. It was Alexander's birthday today.
Oh man,
we didn't get him an orc in a pie.
Does he like pie? Nobody knows.
Happy 40th birthday, Alexander, out there in the chat.
But in Courts of the Shadowfey, we did the same thing, right? We had banquet meals of really weird foodstuffs. We had rituals and ceremonies and rooms full of weird magic. And the stranger it is, the more you can draw the party in. So a dungeon crawl for me can't just be about beating up monsters and taking their stuff. That's important, but there also needs to be the high weirdness that
Yes. Yeah.
frankly.
The players need to keep asking why. They need to keep being interested in figuring out what's going on. And often, we were asked for some advice. I feel like it's
Oh
often
yes, we were. Oh
effective.
my God, totally forgot
Yeah.
to give
Well,
advice.
you definitely worked some things in there. I think 16 goblins hanging off a chandelier. We might as well quote that and print it and ship it because that's Wolfgang's DM advice.
Welcome to my campaign. It doesn't have to make sense right away.
Right? Yeah. But I personally often find it very effective if there is a little bit of dread, a little bit of danger, a little
Yes.
bit of trepidation that's you're hanging over the players. And so you can accomplish that with actual mechanics, with the various traps and monsters that are involved. But a lot of that is about description. For BR Hodes who asked us, what are ways to accomplish these things?
Oh yes.
Just describing a strange noise that comes out of nowhere that the players might follow down a hallway and then it just stops and then there's nothing.
Yes.
Um, you know,
Yes.
exactly, things
Little
like
red
that.
herrings are great, and also turning their usual tools in a new direction works. I did this trick once. It was a Shadow Realm adventure where I basically turned out the lights slowly.
Mm.
Right? The party's like,
Ooh.
okay, we're in the Shadow Realm. Great, great, great. Doing our thing, magic sword, magic lantern. I'm like, it's been a few hours and the lights are getting dim. Well, magic sword. Yeah, it's been a few hours and the magic sword flickers and dies. What?
Yeah.
My
Then they
magic
freak out.
flashlight just went out. Well, what about the magic lantern? It's still going, but you think it's dimmer than it was. Ah, we're going to be in darkness. Half of us are humans. No. Right.
Yep.
And suddenly, I mean, it wasn't a combat encounter, but it did freak them and make them say, maybe we should, think about what our plan is to get to somewhere where this won't happen or figure it
Yeah,
out.
just small, subtle variations in things like the glow of the magic sword or the magic missile manifests itself in a strange rainbow of color of missiles instead of the normal, light blue force color. And it doesn't change the way the spell mechanically works, but it does make them wonder, well, what is it that's causing this? And so it really often can cause players to have a sort of almost a false sense of security sometimes of like, oh, there's weird things happening, but they're not affecting us negatively. And so they
Right.
start barreling through rooms, not necessarily looking for traps and opening doors or going over to the treasure chest that's a mimic. And that can
Right. They're just
be
like, oh, the DM's throwing a bunch of weird chaos magic at us. It won't hurt us. Uh, your shield just turned into a frog. I'm sorry.
things like that. Exactly. I will throw a word of caution on that sometimes players can really fixate on those little things that you just threw in there for flavor that weren't necessarily
Yes.
meant to be something to manifest mechanically, and then you've got to come up with, as a DM, what is actually going on. I
Right.
have made up entire characters on the fly and streamed games because I was just trying to get them to get to point B, and now
Yeah.
they've decided that this NPC who doesn't exist in the adventure is their mascot.
Is
So
way more interesting than whatever you had planned. Yeah, and I like it when things are reversible too, right? Like you
yes.
leave the Shadow Realm, your magic sword works normally again. You take your shield out of the Chaos room. Oh, it's a shield again. I don't,
Yeah, you don't want to
unless
punish them. You don't
you
want
don't
to
want
make
to
it
punish them.
unfun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I like that question. That was a good one.
Yeah, that was a great question. And BBQ Haas says that their IRL play group started turning off the lights in the physical room and lighting the table with candles whenever they were in dark dungeons. I have also
My,
done that.
I have done that, but now my eyes are too bad. I need the light.
Oh, but I mean, another bit of DM advice can be, creating that atmosphere and sort of getting players into the mindset of what's going on. Using music at the table,
I know.
that's a
Wes
great
Otis
way.
over at Plate Mail Games has done a set of Midgard audio tracks that are loops,
Yeah.
basically, sort of thematic loops, and they're a blast. I think he kickstarted them 2 years ago, and I still use them occasionally, but now it's all like, how do I get streaming audio to work across Discord, whatever it
Yeah.
is. It's a different
Yeah.
thing.
And how can folks find those files to use in their own games?
I don't know, but if you search Midgard Plate Mail Games or Midgard Audio, I bet it will come up. I should dig around for that.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, and I think
Kickstarter.
maybe one of the tracks was called the Scarlet Citadel. I can't remember.
Well, we certainly had that cool promo video that used some great music and sounds in the voiceover.
He's been an audio genius for a long, and there are other people. Sirenscape does cool audio.
Yeah, Sirenscape does fantastic jobs, and they have specific sound sets that are geared to dungeon crawls and dungeon adventures like this that would work perfectly. They've got sound sets for the WotC adventures, lots and lots of the Paizo adventures.
Yep.
Any of that stuff would work great.
I like that level of atmosphere. I know, like, you go to the Haunted Mansion in Disney, right? And you don't realize how much of what is creepy about it is the audio.
Yeah, absolutely. It just melds into the background and you don't notice it after a while, but it really enhances the experience, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, so we only have a few more minutes left on this stream. So folks who are in chat, please throw your questions at us if you can, your parting comments, your razzes and jokes. We'll take all of it in the last few minutes here. But to wrap things up, Wolfgang, do we want to talk a little bit about stretch goals that are coming up? We posted something in an update not too long ago today to give a little bit of a sneak peek of some of that stuff.
Yes. Well, the goal we unlocked Secrets of the Citadel as a stretch goal. So we're doing the sort of table of hooks and weirdness. And we're also doing stretch goals that are just going to unlock stuff for backer only posts.
Yes.
So little previews, lore, magic items, whatever it is, about the Scarlet Citadel. And I think one of them's coming up like really fast.
Possibly tonight. Yeah, there's one
tonight.
There's one at 75K.
Yep, the one at 75K is like the preview on it's the Secrets of the Owlbears.
Yeah, that's the secret.
I love, and I'm not going to spoil it here, but yeah,
we've got some awesome art on that one. You wrote that update. It's all about the owlbears that you'll find in the Citadel and what they're like and how they got to be the way they are and why you might take pause more than you normally would with a giant creature that has got an owl's face and is ready to tear your guts out. They are not just 3 kobolds in a suit, excuse you.
No, they're really not. They're a little more than that.
Yeah.
So we got that one coming. And I like the secrets. I think we might have another set of player handouts or point of view art coming, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. We got some point of view art, 3 pieces coming up at 80K. At 90K, we have some really fun sneak peeks at some owlbear magic items. And we dropped the word Bizarre in an update as a very... Yeah.
These are my favorite magic items, even more than the void ones. Oh my good. We have to get to 90K because, okay, they're disgusting, but they're awesome.
They are disgusting, right? I love Bizarres because they're so unique and they're so gross, and you can put them in there and you know exactly what they are and where they came from. And who doesn't want a special magic item in your pocket that was once in the gullet of an owlbear?
Adventurers will do anything if it gives them a mechanical edge. You know they will.
True. It's true. If we make them have to lick those Bizarres, by golly, they will lick some owlbear Bizarres.
They will. And I'm like, ew, this is gross. I think I know who was responsible for these items, and it wasn't me, but when I saw them, it's like, I wish I had come up with these things.
Yes. Can we say who's writing them, or do we?
I think I am quite positive that Scott Gable was.
It's Scott. It's absolutely Scott Gable. Yes, our website Kobold.
Yeah, and
Warlock.
He is a big fan of the Cthulhu mythos, the gross, the disgusting, and the weird, and it really shows in these items, which are a blast. So yeah, we'll share those. I guess that'll be a backer only preview when we get to that point.
Yes, when we get to that point. But first we've got the Secret of the Owlbears. So so stay tuned to the Kobold Warrens to learn exactly what's going on with these strange, particularly disturbing owlbears that you'll find in the Scarlet Citadel.
Yes. It seems to be a season of owlbears. I don't know why, but notice there's another one who wandered off to the north.
We've got two final questions, it looks like, in chat. One is a very quick answer. That's from Blaine McNutt, our very own Director of Digital Growth over in the Warrens, who wants to know who has longer toenails. Real easy, it's Wolfgang. They're gross. Moving on. Penguin Witch Doctor wants to know, is there reverse gravity in the dungeon, Wolfgang?
I didn't put in reverse gravity, but even though I love those encounters, Steve has something brewing on one of the lower levels. I need to talk to Steve.
Yeah, he might have something that's maybe an anti-magic field or some kind of something.
I don't think it's quite reverse gravity, although that is a classic old school dungeon thing. And there
is. Yeah.
Well.
Or lack of gravity, rather, an area where there's no gravity and you float around, right?
Oh, zero gravity.
Yes.
Those are even better because, of course, suddenly the one who has wings or a fly spell is king of that encounter.
Yeah.
Everyone else is just flailing around trying to figure out how to flap their arms.
It's like, you thought that I was ridiculous for spending all of this gold on potions of fly, but who's ridiculous now? And I can get through this field when you can't.
This is where the gnome and his weird flying machine finally pays off.
Oh, that's a great gear forged
kind of thing.
Yeah. Tinkery gnomes are a great Midgard thing.
Oh my god, a little tinkery. Not as tinkery as Spelljammer gnomes, but still moderately tinkery.
We also have some diabolic gnomes in Midgard, just FYI.
Those are my favorite gnomes. They're all evil. Kobolds hate them. They're good fun. Yes. I think we don't want to give too much away about the lower levels, but we are going to be back, and I think Steve's coming to do one of these chats too, right?
On the 30th. Hopefully we'll be able to have Steve join us.
And we've been talking about all the awesome art. I twisted the art director's Mark Radle's arm, and so did you, Amanda, right? And has he actually said yes? Is he coming on the show?
I hope so. I hope that if I say join us next week for our special guest Mark Radle, that we will be able to have Mark join us. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get him on the show.
Art directors are wily and hard to, the number of times I've been in an in-person convention and some young artist, fresh-faced with a great thick portfolio, shows up and says, "Please point me at your art director. I want to show him all the work I have done." And I turn around and it's like, you just missed him. He's elusive. They're like this. Yeah. But I think we're going to bring him on.
I hope so. Yeah. We're on the schedule to talk about the art next week. The following week, we're on the schedule.
Which might include the maps, or does it not include the maps?
It could include the maps. We talked a little bit earlier in the stream about the overlays and the little 8x10 inserts that you can put over the big flip mats that we're presenting in the map folio, which is great.
Or I believe you can just kind of flip them over onto your virtual tabletop too.
Yeah, and all of that will be part of the virtual tabletop licenses as well. So we are providing DMs, GMs with everything that you need to run this dungeon crawl adventure. So do you have any parting words that you would like to tell our fans? Any parting
words? Yeah, the Scarlet Citadel is, honestly, we're throwing everything at it in terms of putting our best dungeony foot forward, because Kobold Press, despite many years of publication, has never attempted a dungeon this big, right?
And that's a good point.
Multi-leveled, complex, metaplot, lots of hooks, lots of angles, 1 to 10 on the levels. We've always done little one-shots and little crawls, and here's a small tomb, and here's 12 layers, or here's 16 chambers, but never let's just go all out. So I can say for Scarlet Citadel, we are going all out, from the cartography to the design, the appendices full of weird magic, the NPCs, the nearby city or village.
Yes.
I mean, I'm very proud of how it's come along so far. I've described it as super deadly. We may have toned it down slightly from the bring backup characters at all times level, but it's not quite first edition where you're going to die every 30 steps, but
maybe every 32 steps.
Every 32 steps. It's a challenge. I think people are going to have a ton of fun with it. And I
Yeah.
want to hit a couple of those next stretch goals for an extra map, more secrets, and all the stuff we can't talk about yet that's at the 100K mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Those of you in chat, please share the campaign link far and wide, as much as you can or would want to. That will ensure that we will be able to unlock all the fantastic, awesome stuff that we have got planned for our stretch goals. I'm going to throw the link here into chat. Check it out. And we have many more things coming out from this Kickstarter for everybody. So, I wasn't supposed to do that. Sorry, moderator. There is a link. You can find us on Kickstarter, Scarlet Citadel, Kobold Press.
Did you just get a finger wag from the moderator?
I did. Oh no, getting myself into trouble.
All right then. Well, we won't do that next week when we come back for art and much art preview.
Yeah, much art preview.
But thank you for having me on. I love talking about this weird, wonderful dungeon. I hope everybody has as much fun with it as I have.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah, and we're so excited to see the dungeon see the light of day so that adventurers never will.
That's a nice way to put it. Why didn't we use that tagline?
Tagline. I have so many taglines in my pocket. You know, if you would have let me written 3 promo videos, I would have written 3 promo videos.
Right.
But thank you all so much for joining us today on Twitch. We have been Kobold Press. I am Amanda Hammond, the editorial director. He is Wolfgang Baur, the Kobold in Chief.
Hey, it's been great. Thanks, everybody.
It's been wonderful. Please join us next week for a discussion on art and maps, and we will see you all next time.